Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads, and I am Lee, here today with a video about, sorry my phone's being noisy, about time travel books. Last week, I'd done an author spotlight on S.M. Stirling and his book Island in the Sea of Time, as well as some others in the series. I just finished reading this a couple days ago. It took me 6 days to read. He is great at world building. But it got a little too descriptive for me, and I wish he had cut some of it out, because it was long. Anywho, but it was a great book. I do recommend it. 4 stars, 3.5 stars rounded up to 4 on Goodreads. Now, that, as a response to that video, Victoria, who I think is from Australia, asked me if I had any other time travel book recommendations. And at first, my initial response was, boy, do I. And then I thought, do I? So I did a little search on my app to find out what time travel books I had, and I couldn't find that many because my app doesn't seem to catalog them like that. And then I went on to 3 different websites and looked at some of the best time travel books that were out there, and I chose the ones that I have. And I might have accidentally also gone to Barnes & Noble and gotten a couple more that I didn't have. Who knew that would happen? Anywho, so here we are. Victoria, this one's for you. I want to start with the most problematic one for me. And it is not problematic for me because it contains domestic violence and rape. I am able to separate myself and understand that what happened in Scotland 100 some odd years ago or longer is not how things are today, or even how they were in 1945. There's a different reason that this is problematic for me, and that is because of the author. And of course that is Diana Gabaldon's Outlander. I read this not long after it came out, and I really enjoyed the book. I read the first 3 books in this series, and then there was a long wait between books. And I get impatient like everyone else, but I understand it takes time, except for George R.R. Martin, who I'm really not happy with because he needs to finish that series before he dies. Anywho, not the point. So, but like I said, there was a really long period between books, and I guess the fans got impatient and started emailing or writing. I don't remember. This was late 90s, maybe 2000. And started pressuring Diana on when the next one was going to be put out and published. And she wrote in response, I guess it was on her blog. I cannot find it anymore. It was more than 20 years ago. Her response was very kind of rude and just overall had a nasty tone about, and condescending. And I don't remember all the words that she put, and it's not, I can't find it online anymore. The earliest I see on her blog is from 2008. This was way before then. But it really turned me off on her as an author. I get it, fans can be pests, I'm sure, and people can be rude, but I don't think that that's something you should just put out into the world unless your safety is at stake. I mean, just let fans be fans, and you don't have to respond to every little thing. Anywho, let's talk about the Outlanders, now a Starz hit series. Scottish Highlands, 1945. Claire Randall, a former British combat nurse, is just back from the war and reunited with her husband on a second honeymoon when she walks through a standing stone in one of the ancient circles that dot the British Isles. Suddenly, she's a Sassenach, an outsider, in a Scotland torn by war and raiding clans in the year of our Lord, 1743. Claire is catapulted into the intrigues of a world that threatens her life and may shatter her heart. Marooned amid danger, passion, and violence, her only chance of safety lies in Jamie Fraser, a gallant young Scots warrior. What begins in compulsion becomes urgent need, and Claire finds herself torn between 2 very different men in 2 irreconcilable lives. Again, I really enjoyed this and enjoyed the first 3 books when they came out. I can separate myself from the rape and the domestic violence because of the time difference. But the tone of that author's response to her fans really, really just turned me off, and I've never read another Diana Gabaldon book again. I may do a reread of this at some point. This is a new copy that I picked up because my copies are missing. They are probably with all my mom's stuff in storage. But I'm not going to reread it anytime soon because it, like Island in the Sea of Time, is over 600 pages. Anywho, down on the floor this one goes. I just cleaned up this area and it is packed with books again. The next two books are books that I bought from the list that I was looking at. One of them, I think, seems to be more of a time slip than time travel. I have very specific ideas about time travel. The Outlander fits that because she actually travels through time and stays there for a while. So does Island in the Sea of Time. Recursion by Blake Crouch may be kind of on the border between a time slip and time travel. I am not sure. This sounded fascinating to me. At first, it looks like a disease, an epidemic that spreads through no known means, driving its victims mad with memories of a life they never lived. But the force that's sweeping the world is no pathogen. It's just the first shockwave unleashed by a stunning discovery. And what's in jeopardy is not our minds, but the fabric of time itself. So, I don't understand what's going on here. I can't wait to read this. In New York City, hit myself in the face, Barry Sutton is closing in on the truth. And in a remote laboratory, neuroscientist Helena Smith is unaware that she alone holds the key to this mystery and the tools for fighting back. Together, Barry and Helena will have to confront their enemy before they and the world are trapped in a loop of ever-growing chaos. So, I've not read any Blake Crouch before. I do look forward to reading this, and I'm not reading it right now because I'm reading something else, and then I've got to continue with Christmas in July, but this is going up there in the read soon pile that's about to fall over. Next up, a classic, one I did not realize was about time travel, and that is Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. I've not read this, and on the back, it doesn't really say anything. It's hard sometimes with the classics to find out what they're about. But this is from, I guess, I don't know. Slaughterhouse-Five, an American classic, is one of the world's great anti-war books. Centering on the infamous firebombing of Dresden, Billy Pilgrim's Odyssey Through Time reflects the mythic journey of our own fractured lives as we search for meaning in what we fear most. I think that this will resonate for me more now than it would have when I was in college or high school, now that I know what the Dresden bombing is and I understand more about the world wars and war in general. So, I'll get to it sometime. I'm not sure when. Next up is a book that I've had in my TBR forever. Well, forever in the past 4 years. And that is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I do look forward to reading this. I just don't know when I'll get to it. I'm going to try to do a time travel read soon, but it will probably be Recursion. Dana, a 20th century black woman, is celebrating her 26th birthday with her new husband when she is snatched from her home in California and transported to the antebellum South. Rufus, the white son of a plantation owner, is drowning, and Dana has been summoned to save him. Repeatedly drawn back through time, and with each stay growing longer and more perilous, Dana is forced to contend with the brutal legacy of slavery and white supremacy, not knowing if her life will end long before it has a chance to begin. This really looks good. Really looks good, but it's got small font. So, anywho. It's TBR. This is another one that I'm not sure if it's a time travel or it's really a time slip or somewhere in between. Another one that I've had in my TBR forever, that is Stuart Turton's The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I love the premise of this. I've almost picked it up to read a couple of times. I just haven't sat down with it yet. The rules of Blackheath. Evelyn Hardcastle will be murdered at 11 p.m. There are 8 days and 8 witnesses for you to inhabit. We will only let you escape once you tell us the name of the killer. Understood? Then let's begin. At a masquerade ball thrown by her parents at their English country house. I love books set in England. It's kind of like Maine. Maine and England are like my fantasy places to live, but with perfection, like weather. Anyway, Evelyn Hardcastle will die. She will die every day until Aidan Bishop can identify who murdered her and stop the killer. At the beginning of each day, Aidan wakes up at Blackheath House in the body of a different guest of the gala he attended the night before. And some of those guests are more helpful than others. So this is a gothic mystery, and I look forward to it. I just don't know when I'll get to it. Not going to talk too much about the next one because I did this in a recent book haul video. That is, this is how you lose the Time War by Amal Mohtar and Max Gladstone. I think I said in that video. I don't know which one it is. So I won't link it. But I think I said I have picked this up and put this down in the bookstore 1,000 times, and I finally picked it up. So now we're going to do some blasts from the past. This next one, I thought I hadn't read, but I've at least read some of it because I've got highlights that have faded and notes in here, and that is a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. In this, Hank Morgan, cracked on the head by a crowbar in 19th century Connecticut, wakes to find himself in King Arthur's England, facing a world whose idyllic surface masks fear, injustice, and ignorance. With the agility of Mark Twain's unique virtuosity, this acrobatic tour de force moves from broad comedy to biting social satire, from the pure joys of wild hijinks to deeply probing insights into the nature of man. So if I did read it, I do not remember much about it. But I've got a paperclip in here. I've got notes in here. So, I might give this a reread one day. Next up is one I have not read, and I didn't even realize I had because it did not come up when I did a search for time travel in my app, and that is H.G. Wells's The Time Machine. And despite the fact that I haven't read it, this book is falling apart. So I want to try to get to that. And if I do enjoy it, I might pick up a keeper copy because this one is not going to last the reading. There's a sticker on the back of this that's covering part of the blurb. Okay. That's not coming off well. Anywho, see the sticker. I've had the most amazing time. So begins the time traveler's astonishing first-hand account of his journey 800,000 years beyond his own era. I don't think I'd want to go that far in time. And the story that launched H.G. Wells' successful career and earned him the reputation as the father of science fiction. Wells sends his brave explorer to face a future burdened with our greatest hopes and our darkest fears. A pull of the time machine's lever propels him to the age of a slowly dying Earth. There he discovers 2 bizarre races, the ethereal Eloi and the subterranean Morlocks, who not only symbolize the duality of human nature, but offer a terrifying portrait of the men of tomorrow as well. This was published in 1895, and I definitely want to try to get to this one. Next up is a book that is very dear to my heart, and it will always be dear to my heart. That is A Wrinkle of Time by Madeline L'Engle. I did a reread of this in 2021. Loved it then. Still love it now. I just adore this book. Adore it. I could reread it, not every year, but I could reread it right now and still love it. It was a dark and stormy night. Meg Murray, her small brother Charles Wallace, and her mother had come down to the kitchen for a midnight snack when they were upset by the arrival of a most disturbing stranger. "Wild nights are my glory," the unearthly stranger told them. "I just got caught in a downdraft and blown off course. Let me sit down for a moment, and then I'll be on my way. Speaking of way, by the way, there is such a thing as a tesseract. A tesseract, in case the reader doesn't know, is a wrinkle in time. To tell more would rob the reader of the enjoyment of Miss Langle's unusual book." That's all I'm going to read about this. If you haven't read it, it is YA, but it is near and dear to my heart. Some people don't like it, but I loved it, and I will continue to love it. Next up, another book that I'm not going to talk too much about. I did an author spotlight on Janet Chapman back at the beginning of May, and I will link that and my author spotlight on S.M. Stirling in my description box below. I love Janet Chapman. Her books are a little dated. This was published in 2003, but she is just an author I hold near and dear to my heart, always will. I just love her. She passed away some years ago, and it makes me sad because she just built a world that I love to go back to. Now, I said when it was dated, it was not dated as A Knight in Shining Armor by Jude Deveraux, which was up in one of the greatest time travel books on the websites that I looked at. And this is dated because she slaps a kid, she slaps her boyfriend, or I don't remember who she slaps. She's a slapper. She's obsessed with weight. She could practically encircle her waist with her hands, and that is way too skinny. This was published in 1989. I loved the book at the time. Now it's just so problematic. There's rape, which I said I could separate it. I did, but now it just, I think in combination with everything else, the slapping, and then at the end, she could see how living with a man had cheapened her, and just such anti-woman things. It really changed the way I see the book. It's a keeper, but I really can't recommend it anymore because of those things. Because they really jump out at me now. And I understand in 1989, things that aren't acceptable were less frowned upon. I'm not going to have time for it anymore. Matt Haig, The Midnight Library. Again, is this time travel, or is it a time slip, or is it an after-death kind of thing? I think it's more of the latter. Between life and death, there is a library. Up until now, Nora Seed's life has been full of misery and regret. She feels she's let everyone down, including herself. But things are about to change. When she finds herself in the Midnight Library, she has a chance to make things right. The books in the Midnight Library enable Nora to live as if she had done things differently. Each one contains a different life, a possible world in which she made different choices that played out in an infinite number of ways, affecting everyone she knew as well as many people she never met. With the help of an old friend, she can now undo every decision she regrets as she tries to work out her perfect life. But things aren't always what she imagined they'd be, and soon her choices place the library and herself in extreme danger. I have very little recollection of this book. I did like it. It is acclaimed. When was it published? 2020. So I read it after I moved into this house. Anyway, do recommend. I got a good feeling when I think about it, so that is always a plus for me. Next up, another book I've read that is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I think I gave this maybe 3 stars. It's okay. It's good. It's a fun little read. Is it one of the best ever time travel books? I don't think so. I think it's fine. I think it's a good light read, a palate cleanser. For cynical 23-year-old August, moving to New York City is supposed to prove her right, that things like magic and cinematic love stories don't exist, and the only smart way to go through life is alone. She can't imagine how waiting tables at a 24-hour pancake diner and moving in with too many weird roommates could possibly change that. And there's certainly no chance of her subway commute being anything more than a daily trudge through boredom and electrical failures. But then, there's this gorgeous girl on the train, Jane. Dazzling, charming, mysterious, impossible Jane. Jane with her rough edges and swoopy hair and soft smile, showing up in a leather jacket to save August's morning just when she needs it most. August's subway crush becomes the best part of her day, but pretty soon she discovers there's one big problem. Jane doesn't just look like an old-school punk rocker. She's literally displaced in time from the 1970s, and August is going to have to use everything she tried to leave in her own past to help Jane. Maybe it's time to start believing in some things, after all. Anyway, cute little palette cleanser. Another cute little palette cleanser is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I can't remember how this one ends, but I really had a good time with it. It's about grief and loss. So many of these rom-coms really are, and I think that people should I gotta read this part. Instead of reading the back, let me get back to my point. So many rom-coms do contain grief and loss and love, and I think more people should give them a chance because they are really deep in that. So she moves into her aunt's apartment, her late aunt's apartment. There's a strange man in the kitchen, and he keeps, like, every once in a while he'll show up, but when she leaves and comes back, he's gone. So her aunt had said there's always been some magic in that apartment. And this is the grief part where she's talking about her aunt, how she missed her every day in ways she didn't think she understand. She never wanted anyone to see the monster on her shoulder, so she hid it. And when she finally took the monster's hand, it broke our hearts. That was cancer, I think. It would keep breaking our hearts, everyone who knew her, over and over and over again. It was the kind of pain that didn't exist to someday be healed by pretty words and good memories. It was the kind of pain that existed because, once upon a time, so did she. And I carried that pain and that love and that terrible, terrible day with me. I got comfortable with it. I walked with it. Sometimes the people you loved left you halfway through a story. Sometimes they left you without a goodbye. Sorry, I'm going to tear up. Anywho, I think people discount rom-coms and romances in general, and they shouldn't. On that same subject, Rebecca Serle's In 5 Years, when I was going up to pick out these books in my upstairs library, I had to reread the end of this. Again, grief. Grief and loss and love. Beautiful book. In this one, she awakens in 5 years, and I can't read you the part that I had to reread because it spoils everything. And she's got a man's ring on her finger, and she spends 1 hour 5 years in the future, and she keeps trying to figure out how everything that's happening now, leading up to that time 5 years from now, how does it end like that? And when you find out, it is just as tear-jerking as this book. Okay, next up is a book that I've had in my library, and it's in my upstairs library, so I've had it for a long, long time. That is The Eyre Affair by Jasper Fforde. Jane Eyre? Eyre? Is it The Eyre Affair? I don't know. Published in 2002. Welcome to a surreal version of Great Britain circa 1985, where time travel is routine, cloning is a reality, and literature is taken very, very seriously. England is a virtual police state where an ant can get lost, literally, in a Wordsworth poem. militant Baconians, heckle performances of Hamlet, and forging Byronic verse is a punishable offense. All this is business as usual for Thursday Next, renowned special operative in literary detection, until someone begins kidnapping characters from works of literature. When Jane Eyre is plucked from the pages of Bronte's novel, Thursday must track down the villain and enter the novel herself to avert a heinous act of literary homicide. This is another one I need to get to. I cannot believe I've not read this in all these years. Yes, I can. Anywho, I'm trying to get to this year, maybe. The final two books that I have to talk about that I own are both ones that I've read, and both one I only have vague recollections of, except for They Make Me Feel Good. I remember the second one more than the first one. That first one is Faye Far Away by Helen Fisher. I have really good thoughts when I think about this. Again, this is about loss and grief. This was copyrighted in 2021, so I've read this since I moved into this house. Every night, as Faye puts her daughters to bed, she thinks of her own mother, Jeannie, who died when Faye was 8. The pain of that loss has never left her, and that's why she wants her own girls to know how very much they are loved by her, and always will be, whatever happens. Then, one day, Faye gets her heart's desire when she travels back in time and is reunited, not just with her mother, but with her own younger self, the little girl she can scarcely remember. Jeannie doesn't recognize grown-up Faye as her daughter, even though there is something eerily familiar about her, but the two women become close friends and share all kinds of secrets, except, of course, for the deepest secret of all, the secret of who Faye really is. Faye worries that telling the truth may prevent her from being able to return to the present day to her dear husband and beloved daughters. Eventually, she'll have to choose between those she loved in the past and those she loves in the here and now, and that knowledge presents her with an impossible choice. If only she didn't have to make it. Really, really good story. Victoria, if you've made it this far, of all these books, I think that I've read, this one I do recommend the most, in addition to In 5 Years and The 7-Year Slip. Anywho, finally, there are more time travel books out there, but this is the one that I read, but I also picked up a copy from the used bookstore because I did not have a physical copy, and that is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This is about the JFK assassination. They made a mini-series out of this on one of the streaming channels. I loved this book. Really good King book. On November 22, 1963, 3 shots rang out in Dallas. President Kennedy died and the world changed. What if you could change it back? It begins with Jake Epping, a 35-year-old English teacher in Lisbon Falls, Maine, who makes extra money teaching GED classes. He asks his students to write about an event that changed their lives, and one essay blows him away. A gruesome, harrowing story about the night more than 50 years ago when Harry Dunning's father came home and killed his mother, his sister, and his brother with a sledgehammer. Gosh, dang, I forgot about that. It's over 700 pages. I'm not going to reread this anytime soon. Probably. Reading the essay is a watershed moment for Jake. His life, like Harry's, like America's in 1963, turning on a dime. Not much later, his friend Al, who owns the local diner, divulges a secret. His storeroom is a portal to the past, a particular day in 1958. And Al enlists Jake to take over the mission that has become his obsession, to prevent the Kennedy assassination. So begins Jake's new life as George Amberson, in a different world of Ike and JFK and Elvis, of big American cars and sock hops and cigarette smoke everywhere. From the dank little city of Derry, Maine, where there's Dunning business to conduct, to the warm-hearted small town of Jody, Texas, where Jake falls dangerously in love. Every turn is leading, eventually, of course, to a troubled loner named Lee Harvey Oswald and to Dallas, where the past becomes heart-stoppingly suspenseful and where history might not be history anymore. Time travel has never been so believable or so terrifying. I really loved this book. And one of these days I'm going to have to do a reread. Maybe this year, because I have been trying to reread my Stephen Kings. I was trying to do them in order, but that didn't really work for me. Anywho, this concludes my time travel book talk. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've read any of these, I'd love to know your thoughts on them. If you have any time travel books in mind that I did not mention here, please let me know in the comments, because you know I'm all about buying me some more books, even though I really should stop. Anywho, that is all for me right now. I will be back probably next week, unless I change my mind and do another do a Thursday post, rare Thursday post. Until then, happy reading!